In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and test generic events in, in Milestone software using MilestonePSTools in PowerShell. So to get started, let's first enable generic events. I don't think they're enabled by default, so we'll go to Tools, Options, and go all the way to the end here to generic events. And by default, there's two data sources listed here, compatible and international. And I think the only difference is really the encoding that's used. So you can set these up any way you like. I'm going to use compatible, and just going to enable that there. It's by default listening on 1234, TCP and UDP, IPv4, and it's set to echo anything that it receives. There's no separator bytes, which means whatever message you send to TCP or UDP port 1234, it's only going to be evaluated and matched to a generic event after the connection is closed, because there's no definition here on what characters define the end of a message. So I'm going to put 13,10 here, and I know that seems strange. That is the ASCII values of the carriage return and line feed, or you might know them as /r. Let's see. It's not going to let me type there. So /r//n are the escape characters if you're a programmer for a new line on Windows. So that's what the 1310 there represents. So by putting 13,10 there, we're going to tell the event server to evaluate the message as soon as it sees a new line /r/n. Okay, and I'm just going to hit OK, and let's test it out. So I've already installed MilestonePSTools. If you haven't done that already, you can do install module MilestonePSTools. And if you're not running as administrator, you can install it just for the current user that doesn't require elevation by doing scope current user. Okay, but I've already got it installed. So I'll just connect. So connect management server, and it's just on the same machine. So I'll do localhost, and I'm already connected. And now I can just send a generic event. So send generic event hello world. And it got echoed back to me. So the event server received my generic event and it echoed the characters back to me. If you're debugging a generic event configuration, then it might be useful to you to enable statistics instead of just echoing the message that the event server received. So if you go to Tools, Options, go back to Generic Events, and change echo all bytes to echo statistics. And let's do that again. Okay, let's try again. There we go. So we got an error because the event server didn't get the message yet that it was supposed to echo the statistics. So the hello world response from the event server when it echoed those characters back was interpreted as statistics, which didn't make sense. So on the second attempt here, we got our statistics. So let me clean that up. So we have the request number. That means the event server has processed 10 generic event messages so far. The message was 11 characters long, so length of the string hello world. There were no events, generic events matched because we haven't created any yet. And then the particular generic event that is matched based on the priorities that you have set up, because you might have a message that matches multiple generic events, but you can set up priorities so that one is more likely to be hit. But we don't have any set up, so it doesn't give us the name of any generic events that matched. But we can see that the event server definitely received that generic event, and it gave us some statistics back. So what this is doing under the hood is it's when you do the Send-GenericEvent command without providing anything but a message, It's checking the configuration of the management server, looking at the configured data sources, that window that we were looking at here in tools and options. And it's pulling the first enabled generic event source, which is going to be the one that says compatible in this case. Um, and it grabs the port that it's using and the protocol, whether it's TCP or UDP or both. If it'll accept TCP and UDP, then the commandlet is just going to use TCP. But if it's set to UDP only, then it'll use UDP to send the message. And then it also checks the registered services to find the event server's address. Oops. So the event server, the address is Artemis, and so it's using that host name to send the generic event to. So you don't have to think about the name or IP of the server you want to send the message to, or the port, or what the separator bytes are. Just send your message. It's great for testing, or if you have an external application that can call a batch script or a PowerShell script, then you can use that to send a generic event off to the software without having to do much scripting or programming. Okay, so let's create a generic event here, and then see what the results of that send command look like after we match a generic event. And I'm just going to look for hello world. And the data source that we're using is the one called compatible. And now let's send our message again. Okay, so we matched one generic event, and the event name was test event. If we have two events that have similar criteria or a similar expression, so we'll do hello world 2. Let's see what that looks like now. Is it showing up yet? I don't think it's a priority thing, but let's try changing the priority. Oh, there we go. So now it matches two test event and test event, or test 2. So it matched both of them. Okay, so what can we do now that we have our generic event here? Just for the sake of demonstration, I'll set up a rule to trigger a smart wall so we can see the event come through and actually perform an action in the software. So I've already got a smart wall set up. So that's over here. Sample smart wall, monitor 1, a fairly simple configuration there. So we'll go to rules, add a rule, and under external events, generic events, there's our test event. And we will set the smart wall monitor 1 using a specific layout. I don't want to set a message, I want to set a camera. And I'll have it reset to empty that smart wall after 5 seconds. Remove cameras from smart wall. Just have it remove any camera that's in there. Okay. Okay, we have our rule. we have our smart wall view here. Let's send our generic event. There we go. Smart wall's now showing that camera. In a few seconds, it'll go away. We can do it again. And the advantage of having this in PowerShell is it makes it really quick and simple to script. So let's say, for example, we wanted to do, I don't know, some load testing. We could do for each integer in 1 to 100, send generic event hello world. And now it's just gonna do that 100 times. I'm not gonna sit here and wait though. So what else can you do with send generic event? If you are debugging, so let's say you have a third-party application that for some reason generic events aren't working, you might use this to help you debug and find out what the issue is. So if you send the generic event with the verbose keyword or switch, then you'll get a little bit more detail. So it'll show you which data source it selected, the compatible one. It'll show you the number of IPv4 and IPv6 addresses that are allowed to send generic events. So this is an important one that a lot of people miss is the event server will not just allow anybody to send messages to be received as generic events. It's not a very secure protocol. So in order to prevent misuse, nothing is allowed except for local connections unless you explicitly add them to one of those lists. So if you have an external system sending generic events into the management server or the event server, then you'll want to go to your generic events settings, and under allowed external IPv4 addresses, you'll want to put those addresses there and separate them with semicolons and just do one per line. And then that way, that IP address will be allowed to send the message. If you have it set to echo all bytes or echo statistics in your data source configuration, then and you're not allowed to send a message, it's going to give you a no access response and a warning that lets you know, hey, you do not have access to send messages, generic events to the server. So that'll help you identify if it's a whitelist issue there. So it'll also tell you which encoding is being used. So Western European, I'm going to assume that that's the one selected over here, Western European. And then it'll let you know, hey, there's some separator characters that are being appended automatically. And then it's saying that it's sending the event string to Artemis on port 1234. And the bytes were sent, awaiting a response. The default timeout in the command is 2 seconds, but you can increase that up to, I think, a full minute. And if there's a response, it'll say it received a response. And then the statistics, they actually just come back as, like, this would come back as 28,11,1, test event. So the response is being parsed out. If it's a statistic response, it's parsed into a custom object so that it's nicely formatted in PowerShell. So I hope you can put that to good use. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.